Last time, we took a look at the very impactful third part of the main battle of Und Panzer der Film, from a story perspective. And we had several things to talk about. This week, however, we'll be taking a look at it from a technical and tactical perspective, and boy is there a lot to discuss. Both in the sense of the in-story tactics, and in, of course, some specific historical tank-related things that they are drawing on for some of these key moments. As you might expect from an 11-minute segment of the movie that sees 35 tanks knocked out. So without further ado, let's get into it. As always, a quick spoiler warning in case you somehow wound up here without having already seen Und Panzer der Film. If that is you, I highly recommend you go do that first, then come back to this video. So the battle continues right after the escape from the amphitheater, in which Rabbit Team proved the effectiveness of introducing some chaos that no one could have anticipated into a battle. Crucially, that allowed the bulk of the team to escape the encirclement and scatter deeper into the urban environment of the amusement park. A setting in which, as we mentioned in the last video, Ori itself has already proved its effectiveness, and a setting that naturally helps somewhat even the odds for an on-paper weaker and less experienced force. They get to work right away, luring University Team tanks into narrow streets perfect for ambushes. We quickly see that the various members of the Ori conglomerate team, the members of the main Ori team in particular, have really done their homework in researching the battleground. Hippo Team has prepared a number of perfect camouflage panels to conceal their Stug 3 in various ambush positions, while other tanks in their group, like Rosehips and Mallard Team, lead the enemy into their trap. And like any good ambusher, Hippo Team knows to immediately move to a new position after taking their shot. We also see either additional preparation at work by other members of the conglomerate team, or just really keen awareness at work, with the group that includes Leopon Team and Katyusha. Here, Katyusha recognizes that the buildings around them are in fact just sets, and not proper buildings, so they can be very easily driven through to both avoid getting surrounded and to ambush opposing forces from unexpected directions. Remember, she's more than just a funny short girl with a bit of a tsundere attitude. She's a team commander for a reason. Good old battlefield awareness can really make a world of difference, as we've seen before in Und Panzer, and of course in real-life tank battles that inspired all of this, and that really comes into play here. Inspiration from real events is even more apparent as we shift over to where Anglerfish Team and Turtle Team lead some more University Team tanks into the Hedge maze. This part of the battle certainly took inspiration from the tank battles in the French Bocage following the D-Day invasion, though we'll get a more direct recreation of that in Das Finale. But once again here, we see Ori's preparation and ability to shift tactics being put to great use. The hedges are high enough to completely hide all the tanks involved, but it is also a maze, so the tanks inside will have a rough time navigating, and there's a real risk of getting trapped in a dead end. Well, that would be the case if Ori didn't have the stealth MVPs of Anzio up above, providing them with both real-time directions and intel on the enemy positions. Another advantage Ori has here is that their tanks are less impacted by the tight confines. Turtle Team's Hetzer is a tank destroyer, so turret rotation is irrelevant, while Anglerfish Team's gun is just short enough to rotate, while the enemy tanks cannot do the same, and that's how they score their first kill here. The aerial view we get shows how hesitant the University tanks are while navigating, and they nearly have a friendly fire incident, while Anglerfish and Turtle Teams basically run circles around them, setting up another ambush, and only after this does Rumi spot Anchovy and co. and realize what's really been happening. Meanwhile, Duck Team and the Chiaton squad are getting into a tank brawl of their own, as they also take maximum advantage of their surroundings to first evade, then attack the enemy vehicles. One attempted ambush by Camouflage Nishi fails, as you'd expect to happen at times, since ambushes don't always work out, and also because her gun is just not great against the Pershing's armor. No, to take them out, they have to get in closer, as Tamada does with a point-blank shot. So, as they exit the Tortoise tank area, the Pershing's longer gun barrel again works against it, as they have to rotate it to avoid hitting the ground. You do not want that to ever happen as a tanker. And then two of the smaller tanks are able to trap its gun in place, as Hosomi gets into place to land a point-blank trap shot and scores the knockout. I don't think real-life tanks ever took it to this extreme, but there absolutely were real cases where weakly armed tanks would try to maneuver to get in as close as possible, while keeping the enemy gun offline, or using terrain that would impact the movement of the longer cannon. In any case, with the enemy here dispatched, they move on. But while we do finally see the University Team on the back foot here, as they are genuinely getting a bit frustrated, they are still experienced professionals, And that focus, that discipline, quickly kicks in as Alice, still in a backline command position, signals the new push with the T-28. And, arguably more important, starts advancing her own tank toward the front line. The Ori defenders had probably been assuming the T-28 couldn't get through their part of the park without having to first take time widening the opening, so their defensive plan there immediately falls apart, and they're forced to withdraw, as they can't hope to take that on head-to-head. Here we also get another example of the skill of the college girls, as Azumi, now leading a group of Pershings, sees through Hippo Team's latest disguise, as they played that trick of theirs one too many times and paid for it. And a very enterprising Chaffee crew gets onto the roller coaster tracks to try and go directly after the Anzio girls. I assume this is probably because there were some censure rules forbidding trying to bring down the tracks with ground fire while the tank was high up on it. Although then again, it is also pretty dangerous to be driving around on these tracks firing at each other. But we'll let that slide. And we set that engagement aside for now as we get to the main event, the start of Alice's rampage. While we'd previously been told just how good Alice was, and while we'd seen her tactical and leadership abilities up to this point, this is the first time where we see just how much of a monster she and her more advanced tank, and of course the rest of her crew, are in direct combat, as she easily dispatches all 5 members of the expanded Duck/Chiaton team. This engagement in particular is a great example of the importance of a sort of fire and maneuver approach to tank combat, which is what you really need to do when you're outnumbered. Though of course, here the Centurion's much better armor helps out a lot also. There are, I think, 2 main historical things being referenced here to some degree. One is Michael Whitman's famous Tiger Rampage, during which he destroyed nearly 30 British armored vehicles in the span of about 11 minutes, while Alice here will be taking out 11 tanks in about 4 minutes. But given that we're dealing with a Centurion tank in particular here, I, in my admittedly somewhat biased opinion, also see a bit of a reference to the tank battles on the Golan Heights during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. There, in a crucial part of the overall battle, a massively numerically superior Syrian force attacked a force of Israeli Centurion tanks. There, part of why the Israeli force managed to win was because their training, knowing they'd be highly outnumbered, focused heavily on maneuvering, fire and move, rinse and repeat, while the Syrian strategy at that point was more or less to click a move and go for it. Additionally, there was a part of the battle where the Israeli tanks held the low ground, which, contrary to what some might think, was a superior position there, as their guns could elevate more than the Syrian ones could depress. And as that battle progressed, there were also many close quarters engagements. So here we have 5 tanks attacking a lone Centurion from higher ground, only for the Centurion to win via far superior skill, maneuvering and firing, and also having advantageous hardware. Enough parallels for me, but before I get too long-winded, let's move on. As Ori is once again forced onto the back foot, its members manage to keep their cool, and do what they can to slow or stop the enemy push. While in real life I don't think there are really any scenarios where you'd want to risk putting your tank in such an awkward angle as Darjeeling does to take out the T-28, desperate times call for desperate measures. And also the fact that they know they'll be alright if their tank is hit definitely allows for taking more self-sacrificial risks that you'd probably never take in a real battle. But they all know this fight is quickly coming to a head, and taking out the toughest enemy tank gives the rest of the team a much better chance. I know some have wondered if the T-28 might have been vulnerable to a top shot, but in the moment it's reasonable to go for the more sure kill from beneath when you know that you'll possibly get only one shot at it. Ori's asymmetrical warfare is still proving effective even in retreat, but now the University team has enough initiative for its section commanders to fight in the way they prefer. But as the big final engagements here get underway, we need to once again give kudos to Rabbit Team, who display some really impressive gunnery to take out the 2 Chaffies about to sandwich the Anzio squad. Though that focus left them completely unaware of Alice, who summarily dispatches them without a second thought as she passes by. But their warning over the radio was definitely appreciated by the rest of the team. More involved tank fights comprise much of the rest of this portion of the battle, and that rain from earlier, remember that, plays a factor, as it makes the drifting of the University team's section commanders here, as they effortlessly take out the Saunders contingent, a bit more plausible on the slick stone. And obviously this is another reminder of just how outmatched the high schoolers are in a straight-up engagement. Kay, Naomi, and Alyssa are just completely outclassed, as we see the faster reaction times of the older girls, and their improved ability to fire accurately while on the move, and just firing more quickly in general. Now we get to one of the more fun bits of the battle, Rosehip's duel with the Chaffee. And a couple neat historical references here, such as the speed limiter, which was a real thing in actual Crusader tanks, and which tank crews would often remove or override. And of course then we have the canal jump, which is almost certainly inspired by an allegedly real tank jump, though that was made by a trio of Cromwell tanks, which jumped a 6.1 meter canal. There, it was to escape as they got surprised by enemy forces. Here, it's so Rosehip can guarantee a kill, even at the cost of her own vehicle. There isn't a ton to say about the mini engagement between Anzio and Mallory's team against an enemy Pershing, apart from more clever use of terrain, the water, and Anchovy taking advantage of getting into the Pershing's blind spot. And as inadvisable as trying to hydroplane a tankette is, they even admit it's never worked before, based on some very brief research, the CV-33 is possibly just light enough for that to be theoretically possible, but still very much not advisable. The last part of this fight is probably the most desperate we see Ori, apart from the initial clash, where the Carl was raining down fire. On the one hand, we have Alice methodically chasing down and eliminating one Ori tank after another, while the rest are just doing whatever they can to slow or take out her sub-commanders. From Leopold team sacrificing their engine, to let the others use their slipstream draft to catch up to the faster Pershings, to Katyusha reliving the Eastern Front and literally ramming one of the enemy tanks to try and stop it, there's no glory hunting here. Everything is designed as a team play to give the team's remaining tanks, at this point Mihos and Mahos, the best odds of success. It might not seem like a lot losing the last 3 powerful Ori tanks to take out just one of Alice's sub-commanders here, but that places Miho and Maho at only a 1-tank disadvantage instead of facing a 2-to-1 disadvantage. It's also really cool here just how fast and how relatively silent in terms of dialogue this last little engagement is. It's professionals against professionals, and treated as such. So yeah, this got a bit long-winded, but there was a lot to talk about for such a short section of the movie. And as I mentioned in the last video, it's all masterfully portrayed in a way that's really easy to follow despite the sometimes frenetic pace of the action. Every decision made here, every tactic used, had purpose and makes sense in the context, and is at least plausible for the vehicles to do, while also focusing on making this fictional tank battle fun and engaging to watch. And of course, the staff involved really got to show off their tank nerd credentials with some of the more deep-cut references and understanding of the details of the many tanks involved here. They put in the work, and it shows. When we next return to Girls und Panzer der Film, we'll look at a much smaller scale engagement, the final confrontation. The first and only time we get to see the Nishizumi sisters do battle side by side, against their toughest opponents yet, in the ultimate clash of Nishizumi style, both versions of it, and the Shimada style of Senshido. If you enjoyed this video and like to support me in what I do here, my books and light novels are all available on Amazon, and you can get early access to videos, sneak peeks, and updates on my upcoming manga and other projects by subscribing over on Patreon. I also offer channel memberships, which get you access to monthly members-only watch-along streams. And of course, if you have any thoughts on this video or there's anything Girls und Panzer related you'd like me to talk about, definitely share them in the comments section below. I'd love to hear them, and while I might not get to respond to every comment, at least not in a timely manner, I can guarantee that I do read each of them. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell, so you don't miss any future uploads. That's all for now, so until next time.